Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, children of all ages, there's no undeniable fact at this point that Joker 2, Joker Folie de Deux, is an absolute flop at the box office. This movie, it cost over $200 million to make, and now we are seeing the returns that are absolutely abysmally bad and way worse than even what the first movie has, and honestly on line with movies like The Marvels. Yes, boys and girls, it is that bad. But the real question is why? Why did such an acclaimed director like Todd Phillips end up giving us such a disastrous dumpster fire that completely and totally misfired with the fans and the critics alike? The critics didn't like the first one very much, but boys and girls, they really hated this one, and it looks like the audience score and the critic scores actually line up. Well, there's some insider information that's come out of Variety, boys and girls, that gives us some very interesting, sordid details of things behind the scenes, and it is a fascinating look into what happens sometimes when supervision doesn't always monitor some of these crazy creatives out there that might be absolute geniuses, but just like anybody else that's ever been out there, sometimes you got to rein in somebody who's just that ADD, which a lot of these creatives really are. I mean, come on. We love our Zack Snyder, but boys and girls, when he's let to do whatever he wants on his own, we've seen what kind of crazy compiled mishap of a mess. I mean, it's literally like throw everything into a blender and pour it into glass. No, buddy, ease off. We can't always put everything in there all at the same time. You got to peel it all back. You got to peel it off. It's like an onion. You got to peel back the layers. But seriously, boys and girls, it sounds like a crazy sorted mess. There's some juicy little details that we're going to get into here right now. This is going to be a little bit of a longer one, so make sure you buckle up. Go get yourself a snack. Go get yourself a little pause the menu for a second. Go to the bathroom, whatever you got to need to do, because this is a crazy story behind the scenes, which of course Warner Brothers is denying absolutely everything, but we all know better at the end of the day. So we're going to check this article from Variety.com, getting all of the juicy and sordid details. But before we do, if you do enjoy our content, hit that like button, share with all your friends, and subscribe or follow if you have not already, boys and girls, because we are grinding, we are growing, and I could not do that without every single one of you. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel and keep things afloat around here, check out all the links in the description down below. Also, leave us a comment. Were you one of those who was initially excited about the Joker 2 sequel? As you heard more and more about it, was it something that you lost interest in, or were you one of the ones that decided to go ahead and bite the bullet and go out there and see it the first weekend? What did you think about this movie? Let us know what you think about all that down below. So from Tatiana Siegel over at Variety.com, inside the Joker Folie de Deux debacle, Todd Phillips wanted nothing to do with DC on the $200 million misfire. Oh boy. On September 30th, Lady Gaga blew kisses to fans outside the TLC Chinese theaters ahead of the premiere of Joker Folie de Deux, while Joaquin Phoenix dropped his typical solemn facade and flashed a few smiles from the red carpet. Meanwhile, Warner Bros. Discovery CEO David Zaslav dropped by the after party at Sunset Tower and mingled with the film's two high-paid lead actors as the meatless sliders, vegan Phoenix's idea, that explains so much, made the rounds for all the star wattage on display. There were some notable no-shows, namely DC Studios toppers James Gunn and Peter Safran. Ooh, dun dun dun. Insiders say the duo's glaring absence for the film that is based on one of the biggest draws in the DC canon underscores a dysfunctional dynamic that played out behind the scenes on the ill-fated Warner Brothers musical. And I love the fact that they're still calling it a musical, even though Todd Phillips is like, it's not a musical. Todd Phillips wanted nothing to do with DC during the making of the film, says one agent familiar with the director's unique carve-out, which allowed him to bypass any oversight from the brand's gatekeepers. Yeah, like I said, sometimes when you give people a complete and total free reign, it doesn't always pan out very well, and this one really blew up in their faces because $200 million loss on this movie, you're not even going to come close to breaking even. This is going to be bad. Zaslav, maybe sometimes you need to rein in the creatives a little bit more. Although Gunn has publicly supported the film on social media, Phillips has distanced himself from DC, as the animated title card sequence unspooled inside the iconic Hollywood cinema in the opening minutes. It became apparent that Phillips had just given DC the middle finger. There was no DC Studios logo. And remember how proud James Gunn was of that new DC Studios logo that they premiered, the one that's a throwback to the original comic stuff. Little bit of weird. If the first movie was about some down-on-his-luck, mentally ill guy in a downtrodden city, it makes maybe $150 million worldwide, not $1 billion. But people showed up because that guy was Joker. Talking about the fact that obviously that was the only thing. That's why and this is one of the things that we knew about the first movie, right? This was essentially a repurposed script out there, right? This is something that they just had lying on the shelf. They were like, oh, this is a really good idea. Let's slap the Joker label on it and see if we can make a little money off this. And that's exactly what they did. It was never meant to be a Joker movie from the beginning. But once you label it like that and the fans see it like that, well, if you don't deliver, you're going to end up having some issues. A DC spokesperson downplays any tensions and says Gunn was busy directing the Max series Peacemaker in Atlanta, which had lost a day of production due to the hurricane while Saffron was sick. A Warner Brothers spokesman notes that the DC logo appears at the end of the Joker sequel. Phillips declined to comment for this story. I wonder why. Probably because he knows all of this is true, but he can't actually come out and say any of that publicly because, well, there's probably at some point in the future he'd like Warner Brothers to finance one of his other crazy movie ideas. But after this point, Zaslav, might be time to cut ties and just move on. At some point, you have to kick the dust off your sandals and just move on. Now that the dust is settled on the sequel's disastrous opening weekend, plenty of soul... I love that, disastrous opening weekend. Plenty of soul searching is taking place on the Burbank lot. The overarching question is being asked is, why spend $200 million to make and nearly $100 million to market a tentpole that ignores the DC fan base? And ignores, maybe putting it mildly. As Rolling Stone review of the film sufficiently put it, Joker Folie has a message for fans. Go fuck yourselves. Yeah, that always ends up working out well now, doesn't it? I mean, honestly, this is one of the things we reported on a lot of this behind the scenes stuff that we'd heard about how there was constantly like daily rewrites for scripts. So even beside the fact that it completely and totally tries to ignore the whole Joker aspect of the movie that made the first one so successful, just the fact that there was constant rewrites on the script from day one never ends up well, boys and girls. We've seen that happen several times. Alas, the fanboys and fangirls stayed home, resulting in a shocking $37.7 million domestic opening for Phillips' follow-up to his 2019 Joker. An enormous success that cost just $60 million and earned over $1 billion. Such disregard for the base has brand repercussions. Let's repeat that one more time. Such disregard for the base has brand repercussions. I love hearing this. Notice how we've heard a little bit of a change in tone inside the Hollywood mainstays of articles in the recent past history, boys and girls. It's almost like they have to finally admit that, yes, your fan base is the most important. Because if you don't please them, you're not going to please a general audience, and you're not going to get any of that free promotion that fans always give you. Remind me again how toxic we are. After all, Joker is not some obscure character. The Batman foil is by far the most high-profile villain in comics, spanning either DC or Marvel. But given that Phillips made such a wildly profitable first Joker for Warner Brothers, not to mention 3 Hangar movies, motion picture group chiefs Michael DeLuca and Pamela Abdy seemed unwilling to say no to their prize director with their first green light. Color us shocked there. They let him run wild, and now they're suffering the consequences for it. The movie began production in December, 2 months after Gunn and Saffron took control of DC, and many expected the duo to provide notes and feedback on the R-rated musical, especially given the capital outlay involved. But Phillips balked and would only liaise with DeLuca and Abdy, and he has done little to dispel the appearance of friction, even though Gunn and Saffron were on hand for the first director's cut screening for the studio. When asked by a Collider reporter if the production process changed when the pair succeeded DC head Walter Hamada, or if they did any input, Phillips replied, "With all due respect to them, this is kind of a Warner Brothers movie." Oh, that's right. It's Joker in name only. Screw the DC fanboys and fangirls, as Variety was so willing to point out in this situation. Yeah. Kind of give you a pretty good idea of his attitude. For all the, Warner Brothers speak and going all the talking points from their heads going, no, everything was fine, everything was great, everything was wonderful. That line right there to Collider shows you exactly what he thinks of James Gunn and Peter Safran and DC Comics or DC anything. Right? We knew he hated superhero movies to begin with after the first one, which is why it was such a stupid idea to hire him for the second one after he had been ingratiated to DC fans. Instead, you did this. Good job. You get what you deserve, Warner Brothers. Even after Warner Brothers' feedback was sometimes ignored, sources say Zaslav met one-on-one with Phillips shortly after Warner Media and Discovery merged in April 22, and opening filming in Los Angeles if the director would make the sequel at a lower price point. The studio preferred London, which would cost about 20% less, and we like London too because then we get all their tax returns and know exactly how much money they spent. But Phillips insisted on shooting in Los Angeles, and the budget didn't change. A Warner Brothers spokesperson said the studio supported the decision to film in Los Angeles, and that Zaslav Phillips' confab was merely a meet and greet where they discussed what else the director wanted to make there. Insider Studios said Brass did not want to debut the film at the Venice Film Festival. And honestly, let's go back to that for just a second. Discuss what else the director wanted to make there. Maybe that's true. Maybe that is legitimately how the meeting was gone. Who knows? But at the end of the day, David Zaslav made the mistake of not pulling the reins in on this guy and not pulling him back and taking more control of the whole situation. And guess what? Now you get what you deserve, David. It's one of them situations where I want Warner Brothers to succeed. I want good DC movies and television shows and all of that kind of stuff all over again. I want that. I'm a DC fanboy. Look at my freaking logo for a lot of my channels. Like, it's one of them situations where that's what I want. But at the end of the day, you get what you deserve. You let this guy run wild. You believed all of the rest of the talking heads that just told you he's such a genius. He's a guaranteed hit. It'll all be great. And now you're suffering the consequences for it. Insider Studios Brass did not want to debut the film at the Venice Film Festival as it had done 5 years ago with Joker, but Phillips pushed back. A Warner Brothers spokesman said the studio fully supported the decision to bring the film to Venice. Of course they did. Other battles of will between Phillips and Warner's ensued. Phillips refused to test screen Joker 2, so it premiered in Venice, marked the first time an audience saw it. The critics rejected it, and the film tallied a disastrous 33% score on Rotten Tomatoes, well before earning a dismal D Cinema score. To put that grade into context, the much reviled Madam Web landed a C+ earlier this year. Yeah, with something we talked about. We always take the critics with a grain of salt, right? Because we know a lot of them are paid shills and we have a lot of them is access media and stuff like that. But they hated this one worse than they hated the first one. I mean, it was like across the board, just a disastrous dumpster fire. It was not good at all. A Warner Brothers spokesman says, given the film contains spoilers, the studio did not want unnecessarily divulge plot points too early to test audience, but rather allow moviegoers to discover the film in their own time. Sure. Making a sequel to a billion-dollar movie, whether it's Aquaman or Joker, is considered a smart bet. But with its outsized budget, which included $20 million as upfront for Phoenix, $20 million for Phillips, and $12 million for Gaga. $12 million for Lady Gaga? Are you serious? Literally, like, the only thing I've seen her in, which, don't get me wrong, she did a halfway decent job, was an American Horror Story. And you paid her $12 million up front? And come on, Phoenix and Phillips asking for $20 million up front? They knew they were not going to give you anything that was going to be good, because otherwise they would have asked for profits on the back end, especially after having a billion-dollar movie the last time. They had no desire to do this in any way, shape, or form. Zaslav and everybody else over there should have seen the writing on the wall when they asked for these outrageous price points instead of just cutting a check. You're an idiot and you're a moron for doing this, and you've gotten exactly what you deserve. The film needed to make at least $450 million theatrically to break even. Now, an unlikely scenario, an impossible scenario. It is not going to happen. Warner Brothers, because honestly, the audience score is abysmal too. Like I said, the critics and the audiences agree. This movie sucks. Warner Brothers is already on the back foot following a series of recent money losers, including Furiosa, Aquaman, and The Color Purple. The parent company's stock price remains at a cellar, near an all-time low at $7.67 a share. Hey, anybody want to pool some money together and buy a controlling interest in Warner Brothers? This is a black eye for Warner Brothers at a key time when the industry expected a hit. The timing could not be worse. Joker for the Lou may have also suffered from not having Bradley Cooper's voice at the table. Cooper was a producer on 2019's Joker and is known for his commercial instincts, including his low-budget hit A Star is Born with Gaga, was not involved with the sequel after dissolving his producing partnership with Phillips in 2021. Sounds like Phillips is kind of a prick to work with, boys and girls. And don't get me wrong, some of the best directors are pricks to work with. We hear about James Cameron all of the time. But needless to say, this guy dealing with this kind of prick might not be worth the returns on investment for the future projects, boys and girls, because this did not work out whatsoever. No one could get through to Todd. And the one thing about genre stuff, if you don't listen and pay attention to what the fan expectations are, you're going to fail. This was a source directly involved with the film, ladies and gentlemen, and Variety is not going to publish this unless they can verify it. They've got slightly more integrity than that, surprisingly enough. In fact, catering to the fan base was supposed to be the strategy. When Zaslav era began, the CEO touted a 10-year plan for DC that would take a page from the Marvel playbook, which films adhere to the singular vision of Kevin Feige, yet somehow the Joker sequel was allowed to skirt the mandate, with Phillips operating in an alternate silo from the newly installed DC chiefs. Not surprisingly, the core DC fans revolted, and result is damage to the brand. Honestly, I wouldn't put me personally as a DC fanboy, I would not hold what happened with the Joker 2. I would not hold that against James Gunn or Peter Safran or any of their pictures going forward. We kind of knew from the beginning that this was going to be kind of like its own little alternate universe and its own little thing and its own little sandbox, and that it wasn't going to play with anything else in the bigger DC universe. So honestly, this isn't an issue for me. This honestly just damages the reputation of Todd Phillips, in my humble common nerd's opinion. This is a speed level 2 of disaster, with Warner Brothers massively overspending on a sequel, only to see its audience all but abandon the film domestically. Warner Brothers has the biggest hit of the fall season in Beetlejuice 2. Absolutely fantastic movie. Is doing really, really well at the box office. And now, the fans and the audiences, the fans love it. And now, likely the largest flop, too, in Joker 2. Such is the way of the sequel. The truth is, the creators of Joker 2 went in a direction that the majority of audiences didn't want to follow. Ultimately, choices were made, and unfortunately, they didn't align with moviegoers' tastes. Yep. And you know, it's rare that I will ever give like Rolling Stone credit for anything, but it sounds like they were right. You know, even a broken clock's right twice a day. This movie really was Todd Phillips giving an FU out there to every DC fanboy out there that got excited about the aspect of this might be another weird version of a Joker origin story. He told us flat out that he hated superhero movies and he wanted nothing to do with this kind of stuff. So he walked up with his pedigree and with his BS and floated a bunch of nonsense up to a bunch of people because he's this genius, he's this suspected madman. You just have to let him do his thing and it'll be a guaranteed hit. Yeah, how did that work out? You literally blew probably about $300 million, if not more, on this disastrous dumpster fire. David Zaslav, you're a moron for listening to any of those people out there in Hollywood that told you just to allow Todd Phillips to run wild and it would all end up working out okay. Well, now you've learned your lesson. You've learned it the hard way, and it's a $200 million disastrous dumpster fire at a time that Warner Brothers simply cannot take the hit. I don't know what the future of Warner Brothers looks like. I'm hoping you guys can keep all of this afloat until we get some of those first actual DC movies out there, and I pray to God that they are good, and you should too, David Zaslav, because you are running on your last leg at this point, and you may end up being the guy that goes down as watching Warner Brothers, a legendary Hollywood studio, and DC itself, one of the most iconic superhero brands in the history of the world, go down in flames and turn into nothing more than a footnote in the ash heaps of history. Do better in the future, David Zaslav. Like this article told you, and like what we've all been saying for a long time, make the fans happy will make you rich. Disappoint us, ignore us, and give us the finger, and well, you get Joker. Now talk about a disastrous dumpster fire. That's the joke of the fall.